Hello there. What is going on, everyone? We have come here today to lay to rest and pay our respects to three particular fallen comrades from Star Wars Legion: the Royal Guard, the Rebel Pathfinders, and Emperor Palpatine himself. They are no longer going to be in Star Wars Legion at all, and their entire unit cards have been removed from the game, existing now simply as figments of our imagination. We're going to talk about this and a little bit about all of the rules changes. I mean, there's so much to cover. I can't possibly cover it all in this video, so I want to focus a little bit more on Palpatine, the Royal Guards, and the Pathfinders, their removal, and why they're being removed, what was said, and basically what the future holds for them. Because just because they're removed doesn't mean they couldn't potentially show up again in some way, shape, or form. I'll talk about a little bit what I mean by that as we go into the video. Also, just a reminder, there's a few days left to enter to win that $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So let's start off with the Empire. A lot of Imperial players have expressed concerns that the Empire is the weakest faction right now competitively, and some of the new things for the Empire aren't performing well, like riot troopers. Even the range troopers got a points increase, the only unit to actually see a points increase. But to top all of that off, this kind of blindsided a lot of people that many people's most beloved character in Star Wars Legion, Emperor Palpatine, who I both have a love-hate relationship with because I really enjoy using him, but always suffer when I go against him. He's being removed. Now, I do want to stress that this is not AMG's fault. They have made pretty clear that this is Lucasfilm's fault. Lucasfilm made them take this out of the game, so direct your anger at Lucasfilm and not at AMG. They were forced to do this, and if Fantasy Flight had still had the game, it likely would have been exactly the same. So this is not Atomic Mass Games' fault, even though I know a lot of people are angry and want to attack AMG over this. This is one of those times where I don't think it was their fault at all. They were pretty clear that this had a lot to do with licensing and LFL. Basically, doing this new edition, everything had to go to reapproval through LFL, and LFL said no. And so they're actually the villain here, not Atomic Mass Games. So if you are an Emperor Palpatine player or a Royal Guards player or both, my condolences go out to you. However, that does mean that if you have these miniatures, you might have a collector's item on your hands because they're not going to be able to be used again, at least not in this version of Legion. Now, an interesting thing about this, now, while I can't speak for the Royal Guard specifically because, maybe the Inquisitors can kind of help take their place. They're definitely going to be looking at the Empire as a faction and trying to see what they can add to kind of fill some of the voids. I believe that this didn't actually come as a sudden shock to Atomic Mass Games. It certainly seems like they've known about this for a little while, hence Imperial High Command being one of the expansions that are coming out next year. This is likely going to be one of those ways that they rebalance the Empire with the loss of the Emperor. You have a lot of characters here that are very similar in ways and that they're very high-ranking and very powerful officers in the Empire and can do some of these things. It has also been whispered that Tarkin is also going to have Pulling the Strings, which is, of course, one of Emperor Palpatine's signature abilities. It's not it's not one of those deals where only Palpatine could have done that. If they can kind of break apart some of what Emperor Palpatine can do and spread that out to different people, then maybe that will work. Now, I don't think we're going to get Force Lightning coming out of Thrawn or General Tag, doing "and now you will die," or anything like that. But there could be similar things. And I'm really curious to we already know how Tarkin is going to be, although I do certainly hope that in the Imperial High Command pack, they do give him a hatless option, because I know we already have a version of Krennic. That version of Krennic with the hat on, to me, not a big fan of. Would rather them give him 2 head options, or I'll just use the old Krennic. But everybody else looks fantastic. I'm looking forward to this pack. But this kind of brings up an interesting question, because if this came down to Lucasfilm, and from what I understand with Lucasfilm, a lot of their decisions have to do with how they perceive the IP, how certain characters are being represented. And since Legion at its core is a kind of a small-scale skirmish game, yes, it's a bigger scale than certain other games, but it's still small in the grand scheme of things. When you have an entire galactic empire and you look at a game like Star Wars Rebellion, which is large scale, massive, like ultimate scale, you know, and then the Battle of Hoth, which was kind of like a medium size incursion. Well, Legion is smaller than the Battle of Hoth. You don't even have a single AT-AT on the ground in Legion, so it's more like a single company type of, you know, even a 1,000-point game isn't really that big in the grand scheme of things. So it kind of makes sense that they might say, you know, well, Palpatine wouldn't lead a small incursion himself. But it also makes sense why particularly maybe Darth Vader would. You know, what have we seen these characters do? And then you say, all right, we'll go about Grand Admiral Thrawn. We have seen him do that in the Battle of Atollon and Star Wars Rebels. We've seen him actually take charge of very specific... We've seen him sort of micromanage, right? So who here is really a micromanager? General Tag, it's kind of open-ended enough. He doesn't have that many. He only has like 2 speaking lines in episode 4, and then he's got some stuff in the comics. Tarkin is the anomaly here. So giving Tarkin pulling the strings is interesting to me, because he is like answers only to the Emperor. He's above Darth Vader. So, you know, if the Emperor can't lead such a small skirmish, why is it that suddenly Tarkin can? And I wonder if the answer is something that eludes us. Maybe it has to do with just a rebranding, or the way that they want us to view the Emperor, that he would never, you know, that he's above such things, or what have you. So that's kind of the answer of why the Emperor is out. As far as why the Royal Guard is also out, part of that may be because of the fact that they're the Emperor's Royal Guard. They're not just Royal Guard for anybody. And maybe that was a part of it, is that Royal Guard could potentially ignore the Emperor and just protect Vader, or ignore the Emperor and just protect Krennic, and things like that. And that's not really what the role of the Royal Guard should be. That's kind of what Death Troopers are out there for. And in recent media, that's kind of how we've seen Death Troopers act. You also have Dark Troopers, in that case, in the case of Moff Gideon and the Imperial Remnant. But Death Troopers kind of serve that role. And so it makes more sense, you know, that you wouldn't see Royal Guard out there in these small-scale skirmishes in any case. And maybe they were underpowered compared to how they should be. You know, in the deleted scenes of Return of the Jedi, Darth Vader, you know, was forbidden to see the Emperor in one scene, and he was going to just force his way through, and then the Royal Guard like pulled their spears out, ready to lay waste to Darth Vader. And so if they could beat Darth Vader, then maybe they should have been a little bit higher in power level. But of course, you're going off a deleted scene there, so I don't know if exactly how that measures up to what they're trying to do. It could also mean that they're looking to re-represent Emperor Palpatine in the not-too-distant future. Maybe he'll be in Andor Season 2, and he'll be, you know, presented in a way that's even more high-level and ominous, and in a way that would kind of clash with a representation of him leading a small-scale sort of thing here in Star Wars Legion. So that's kind of my takeaways. All we know is that Lucasfilm said, no, you can't have Palpatine in Star Wars Legion anymore. And as a result, he can't be there. But we do have some of these guys to help fill that void. I'm wondering if maybe General Tag will kind of help fill the role that the Royal Guard won't be able to do. Maybe he can give somebody else Guardian. Maybe he's like working on training folks that way. Maybe he can, you know, make Death Troopers kind of have that extra thing. Or I don't know. You know, I'm wondering if there's going to be command cards that sort of do that. It could be really interesting. I guess we'll have to wait and see. We do have some hints to Thrawn that he might be able to play that one step ahead keyword that Lando's going to be getting. So that's pretty cool. So we have a little bit about Tarkin with pulling the strings. We have a little bit about Thrawn with one step ahead. Not so much about Tag just yet. I'm sure information is coming soon. These guys are probably going to get teased more and more as the months go by. But that's interesting. Now, what surprised me even more, especially with the Jin and Cassian reworks, is that the Rebel Pathfinders are gone. And the only way that you can still run them is just they say that they're now legally, you can proxy them as Rebel Troopers. Again, this is another one that Lucasfilm said no to. Again, not Atomic Mass Games' fault. They were forced by Lucasfilm to pull Pathfinders out of the game. This one hits really hard and at home for me because I face these guys in most of my battle reports. If you watch almost any battle report I've done for Legion, there are almost, anytime I'm facing rebels, there's pretty much always Pathfinders in there. And so having Pathfinders removed is especially interesting to me because I play them a lot. The other thing that's surprising is it seems like they were doing more and more with Rogue One, with another version of Krennic, and we're seeing a lot more Rogue One stuff in Shatterpoint, and then Jyn and Cassian getting reworked and getting, all new command cards and rebalanced and all of this stuff. It just seemed like they were going towards a Rogue One battle force, and now the chances of that seem very difficult, very unlikely. So what are we going to do with these guys? Well, for one, if you find any Pathfinders in the wild, you might want to pick them up because it may be the only way to get cool POW and Bistan miniatures for quite a while. Even though you're not going to be able to play with a Rebel Pathfinder unit, it could still be fun to run them as proxy Rebel Troopers. However, considering how many Rebel Troopers you're getting in the new starters, and that the fact that these are soft plastic, you may not want to go do that. It may just be more of a collector's item thing. So again, these are three expansions that you definitely may want to pick up. I'll probably be doing a video in the future about certain legacy Star Wars Legion expansions that I definitely recommend you pick up because they may not be available anymore. They may have something that kind of sets them apart from the new stuff. So Pathfinders will now be added to that list. There's also another kind of takeaway I have on like how they're going to fill this gap, because they cited something about, the special forces rank that Pathfinders was already in high, a highly contested slot. And I'm like, and I didn't really think that, that Pathfinders really struggled in that department because they were one of the more popular taken, at least in my tables, they're the number one taken special forces for Rebels. But I don't think they really struggled for being special forces. In fact, I thought they were a little overpowered if you know how to play them correctly, because they become hard to kill if you give them duck and cover and give them heavy cover and dodge tokens, and all of a sudden now you're canceling almost every die. You need the largest possible attack pools just to get a couple of damage through on them. And if you have a medic nearby, forget about it. So they can become very tough to kill if you don't kill them quickly. So what can happen? Well, here's some things that can happen. And I think Andor Season 2, which I already mentioned earlier, is going to be a large indicator as to maybe why these weren't renewed or weren't allowed to be in Star Wars Legion right now. You see, in Andor Season 1, we ran across a character by the name of Melshi. And he was also in Rogue One. He was a named character in Rogue One. He happens to also be the character from Rogue One that the unit leader his appearance was based upon. He was basically, the unit leader was Melshi. He wasn't, at the time, deemed an important enough character to have his own signature, Bistan and POW got a unique heavy. And the Pathfinders did always kind of struggle for not having that third heavy, so you couldn't run 3 special forces of them, each geared out with a heavy. So, and I had done videos on this years ago where I did this deep dive on Melshi and found out, the problem with trying to do Melshi as the only other, named Pathfinder would be that they've already done a version of him, and that happens to be the unit leader. So I thought, if nothing else, they would have just redone the sculpts and cast more of a generic unit leader and not necessarily Melshi, freeing up Melshi to be the third heavy. Especially with Melshi showing up in Andor Season 1 as a more important character with more lines and more face time as being a friend of Cassian Andor, and all of a sudden now he's maybe the most popular Pathfinder. So now we really have to redo Pathfinders to include Melshi. So maybe they decided at this point they just need to completely take them back to the drawing board and redesign them from the ground up. I'm not sure if that really is the case, because there's certain keywords that were taken away from Jyn, like Danger Sense, but that are given, that Cassian Andor still has. So Danger Sense is one of the things that these guys have. They had Dauntless and stuff like that. There's certain, and it was a nice combination of things that allowed them to kind of skirt a lot of issues dealing with suppression. They were very good at working with that. Maybe they decided they needed a complete rework, and this will give them time to completely rework them and reintroduce them to the game. And maybe they want to wait until Andor Season 2 comes out. This is coming out next week. So Andor Season 2 probably going to have Melshi in it again. Maybe it'll have Bistan and POW. Maybe they'll be different characters. Maybe they'll have a whole Bad Batch style unit of Rebel Pathfinders. Maybe they'll follow the Bad Batch style and just have, all unique characters, and that's going to be them. Or maybe not. Maybe it'll be a little bit more like Clone Commandos, where they have like Delta Squad and they have the regular unit. Maybe they'll have Rogue One, and then they'll have generic Pathfinders, and maybe the Rogue One version will be, Mel Shi and Bistan and Pow and all these other guys, and maybe not. Maybe not. There's a lot of different ways they could do it. They could basically, I think what I'm saying is they may introduce even more named Pathfinders to make this a more significant type of unit, or an altogether different unit. Maybe it'll be just a Rogue One unit. Or maybe they want to break these characters apart and make them individual operatives. Maybe there's still hope for us to get a Rebel battle force. Maybe all of those things are still possible. Plus, we're leaving out two of the most popular characters from Rogue One, Baze Malbus and Chirrut Imwe, which were also there helping out these Rebel Pathfinders. So they should also be included in that discussion. Now, maybe since these guys are completely off the drawing board and maybe going back to the conceptual stage for an Andor Season 2 related release. Again, releases like that don't usually come out at the beginning. You kind of want your guys at AMG to be able to watch Andor Season 2, get all their takeaways, design characters based on what the current canon is, get it approved by Lucasfilm, and get it created as soon as possible. Maybe they've been given an early access. Sometimes that can happen. That can happen sometimes, but even in those cases, it probably won't be out until like a few months after Andor Season 2 is over. So I would say give it 6 months. Maybe in 2026, we'll see Rebel Pathfinders come back in some format. They'll probably be redesigned a little bit, but they were a really cool unit, and I'd love to see them come back. And they didn't look just like all the other rebels. They looked more like Vietnam era kind of soldiers rather than just these trench coat rebels. I thought that they were a really cool unit, and I'd like to see them back with new sculpts and maybe some different options, and maybe a third heavy, maybe a way to actually run 3 of them and make it be meaningful. That'd be really cool. But those are our 2 units. That are our 3 units, I guess, our 2 factions that each lost the unit. There's other things that were lost. There's a lot of other little things we already knew about. The generic officers are going away, but they're getting replaced with the new commanders. There were a lot of changes. Jyn Erso, got reworked, significantly new command cards. Lando got reworked, new abilities. Cassian got slightly reworked. Iden Versio got reworked, and Agent Callus got reworked. We talked about these a little bit in the live stream. We'll do list building, and we'll do deep dives on these. All of the files, all of the new cards are available on atomicmassgames.com right now. And the rules, there weren't like hugely significant rule changes. Area terrain you can now shoot in and out of, but not through, like it blocks line of sight. They changed the clarification and rulings on different command cards, issuing orders and command hands of cards. And what that basically means in short is that like not all Luke Skywalker cards will work on all versions of Luke Skywalker. Some cards may say Luke Skywalker in bold, but some may say Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight, and those will only work for Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight. They also talked about there being new possibilities of command cards that can have multiple commander requirements, and they can do a lot of clever things with this, which might require, hey, you know what, you need Luke and Han for this. Maybe they can do some for Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano that says, hey, this is a team-up attack, and it requires both Anakin and Ahsoka in order to play this card. That would be a really cool thing. So that would be a fun thing. Little changes like movement and line of sight clarifications with you can now move through your own unit. If you had like 5 miniatures and this guy was in the way, you don't have to move around him. You can kind of pick them up and lay the movement tool through your own unit, but not through necessarily friendly units, but through your own unit. Line of sight with the silhouettes for vehicles, since some vehicles now have arms and legs, like the Aqua Droids that you're going to see unboxed here in a few days. I did a thing with those. They count as heavies, right? They count as vehicles, but they also happen to walk upright like a man, like Frankenstein. Well, if you model them with the arms sticking out, it doesn't extend the silhouette out to the side. You still do the cylinder from the bottom. And then a lot of new keywords like Xi'an Mastery, which we're going to talk about when we get to the Ahsoka preview. They just previewed Ahsoka Tano yesterday. We're going to talk about that, but that deserves its own video. She's got a really cool deflect ability that's like extra damage for every surge you roll and all this other cool stuff. So we're going to talk about all of that. If you want to check out the atomicmassgames.com, the new rule update is there. It's no longer any specific edition or version. They're no longer putting version numbers on the rules document. It's just a date. So that's still the date, effective date. I like having version numbers because it helps me talk to new players and returning players. I'm like, well, what version was it when you left? Oh, here's what happened. You know, so I like those things from a teaching standpoint. It helps me tell people where the game is now compared to where it was at another time. Whereas if it's only ever just Star Wars Legion, which they're saying it is now, that can become confusing over time. You know, what happens 10 years down the road when people are like, well, I was playing in 2030. I'm like, oh, when it was Star Wars Legion? Well, it's still Star Wars Legion, but it's nothing like the Star Wars Legion you knew. You know, it becomes weird. I'd like to be able to have versions to reference. But that's just me. I mean, I don't really care what if they call it an edition. I imagine they're just not allowed to call it an edition ever since X-Wing. But yeah, like other little changes are out there. Like HQ uplink now only has the 2 dots, so you can't run 10 HQ uplinks anymore. Saber throw has been clarified to create a thrown lightsaber weapon when you do it, built off of the dice pool of your melee weapon, so it doesn't count as your melee weapon in ranged anymore. A lot of the changes are subtle clarifications and things like that. And one of the big takeaways is that they made us wait like an extra year off of this, thinking that there was like a massive amount of additional rules coming, that we only had half of the rules. I think they said we only had kind of the other half would be coming next year. And this didn't feel like the other half. It was just the other half of the cards. And only 5 units were really changed. Plus, I guess 3 getting completely removed. But this didn't feel like part 2. It felt like just, a cherry on top of a cupcake. A cherry full of death. For Palpatine, Royal Guard, and Pathfinders. A death cherry, if you will. All right, that's going to do it for today's video. We'll be back with more. We'll be talking about some of these list builders are being updated. I know the folks over at Tabletop Admiral are working really hard to get this whole thing updated. I'll be looking to that to look at new list options and to play around with all the new cards. It is nice to see, like, to finally have everything on the new art style, or the lack of art style. I'm not a fan of the lack of art, but I do kind of appreciate having everything on the same sheet of music. It's time to learn Legion again and learn how to play without some of my favorite folks. I used to love Palpatine. Definitely did. Love to see another Palpatine return. Let me know if you guys think it would be cool to do still do a convention event where there's like a giant Palpatine in his office on Coruscant or whatever, and it's a huge board, and the idea is like rebel assassin teams are like breaking in from all over the place trying to assassinate Palpatine, but he's like now super buff. Like I created an ultimate epic Palpatine on Crabbok.com, by the way. Really cool, free downloadable thing if you want to play it. Custom kind of scenario. He's a super insane ultimate epic encounter kind of guy. I did a Vader down one that's also like that too, so you can check those out. Those are for free over at Crabbok.com under custom content. And that's going to do it for today's video. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are out of this world and help make this whole channel possible. I will talk to you later. May the Force be with you. Live long and prosper. You can't take the sky from me. The spice must flow. So say we all. Be excellent to each other and always wash your socks.